Today, I want to talk about reinvention. It's the kind that comes only after everything falls apart. My guest here is Steve, and he's the host of the Ronin Mindset podcast, where he talks with digital nomads, entrepreneurs, and global citizens who have escaped the matrix and built lives on their own terms. But Steve didn't start here. Like a lot of us, his story begins with a crash. And in his case, it was his divorce. Steve's more than a podcast host. He's an entrepreneur, an Army vet, and a Muay Thai practitioner. Steve, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Jeff. I really appreciate it. Love the intro.
I was on your podcast a few weeks ago, and I think we really connected over travel and what it means to become your own man. And I really like that journey that you're on.
Yeah, it's been interesting. And to the point of your podcast, it really helps to have some distance between the divorce, because that really gives you kind of some clarity when you're not caught up in the middle of all that emotion and everything else that's going down.
Yeah, and that's the first step I recommend, is getting some emotional distance from you and what's going on. The divorce can be so overwhelming that, and you did, I think, something similar to what I did. As soon as I got divorced, or as soon as I got separated, I felt the need to just get as far away as possible, and I ended up in Australia. I couldn't get much further from Toronto.
No, that's about as far as it gets.
Yeah. So let's start talking about your divorce. What was happening during and even before that really knocked you off track?
With me, it was a mix of things. I was married for 8 years total, and I can say with immense certainty that I do not regret the divorce at all. If I do have any regrets regarding that time, is that I hung in there far too long. I should have divorced much earlier, given the situation. I guess like any relationship, obviously there was good points to it. Not everything is all bad. There's always that mixed bag, and I think that's a lot of what messes with our head. But, toward the end, it got last 2 years were really rough. Tons of silent treatment, week at a time, things like that. She, in some aspects, things were good. She was a good partner, but she's also a very, very manipulative woman. And I saw that in kind of the way she dealt with other people. I started to see that, and then, it got turned in full force on me. And, that, especially as somebody who knows you that intimately, they really know how to screw with your insecurities. They know how to push your buttons. They know how to, I'm sure we've talked
very,
some.
very well. I say a lot that a divorce is such a powerful thing, because you thought someone was your best friend, and it turns out that they're not, and they know how to push every single one of your buttons, and your best friend becomes your worst enemy.
Yeah, because they know all your vulnerabilities. It's just, it's rough. So yeah, that like many people, I'm assuming you, like me, and a lot of other guys, that was the situation, and it became kind of rough. But the way I was raised, my mom and dad are still together. I think it'll be 60 years this year.
It's a long time.
So long time. And obviously, I'm sure there were plenty of times where things weren't great. And, so I was kind of determined not to walk away. I'm not that kind of guy. I made the commitment. And there were other factors as well, because things weren't that great. But then this was back, I was in real estate. I had a real estate business doing very, very well financially. And then the crash happened.
2008.
Yep. So there was the added financial stress and everything that goes along with that. At the time, even if I'm thinking about it to this day, it's somewhat difficult for me to untangle the two. You had the divorce, but you also had all those feelings of, when you lose everything. Because I had spent 10 years building something amazing, and then I lost everything. And I was leveraged too much, a lot of lessons learned there too financially, but it's one of those things where I was just kind of stripped of everything all at once. So, we have a lot of different identities as guys, a lot of them tied up. Okay, I'm a married guy. I am a successful businessman or real estate agent. So we have all of these identities, and a lot of them are tied up with our marriage or our career. That's where guys usually have their identities solid. And when all that gets stripped away, you're left with the question of, who am I really? Like, who the fuck am I? And that's a tough one to answer. when you don't have those things to cling to.
So how did you start? Well, did you have that question as you were going through your divorce, or was there like a moment after where you were like where that question really slapped you in the face?
I think it was after. I think it was after, because during divorce, there was. I imagine this is not unique to me at all, but you're just so caught up in this emotion, and then I was also having to deal with the business crash on the side, trying to keep things afloat financially, and dealing with I couldn't really focus on that because all this stuff with the marriage was going on, and it was just honestly, when thinking back on it, it's still a little bit of a blur. It really is.
That's probably your mind protecting yourself, even.
Well, I this much I know. When, and I can't remember specifically, maybe it was a mutual thing. I can't remember who floated the idea first, but I think it was her, of separating, taking some time apart. And, looking back with that clarity, I think that her angle on that was, okay, we're going to separate, and he's going to miss me so much and then come right back and then acquiesce to whatever it is that I wanted and all that. But if that was the case with her, it backfired, because when, I called up a friend of mine who didn't live too close, and really, really good friend, those guys that you can call. And I was like, hey man, you got an extra room in your house. Can I crash? I'll pay you rent, whatever, but can I crash over there? And he's like, everything okay? And I'm like, well, I'm going through some shit, bro. He's like, whatever. I'll have a key made for you by the time you get here.
We all need one of those guys.
Yeah, and I'm lucky to have some of those guys in my life. So, no questions asked. I'll have a key, fresh towels, like, you're good to go, brother. And I was like, all right. And then, so I threw some of my shit in the car. And when I was driving away from the house, it was the biggest sense of relief. Like, I was like, shit, yeah, I'm never going back. Fuck that. It was, obviously there was a lot of feelings, but that was the main one at the time. And I was just like, I could breathe. And it was nice.
I'm laughing because I can really relate. When we got separated, I knew this is telling a lot, but I knew she was having an affair. This was a different Jeff and a different life. So I knew she was having an affair. It was so bloody obvious, but I just wanted that confirmation. I don't know why I needed that confirmation, but I did. So we were sitting on the couch, and I remember very, very clearly. And she went, well, some things happened between me and I just felt like this. Oh, thank God.
You got that peace that you needed.
I got that peace I needed, and I knew I could leave in peace. And I was just such a relief.
It's a very weird and unexpected feeling, to be honest, because I was, at the same time as I was just feeling this overwhelming sense of, oh, I can breathe. I was like, at the same time, I'm kind of surprised. I'm like, wow, this is strange, but I feel free.
Yeah. Yeah.
You finally let go, or you get whatever it is that clicks in your mind, and you let it go.
So you crashed with your buddies for a bit. What happened after that?
Well, we ended up getting a divorce, because she contacted me a couple weeks later and was like, I think it's time for you to come back. And I'm like, no. I'm like, actually, I think it's probably time for you to move out of the house so I can come back, which didn't go over that well. The fortunate thing, in my case, about losing everything in the real estate crash is there was nothing left for her to take. So, if there was a bright side to any of that, she did try and get the house, but fortunately, and this was partially, I think, because I was preparing for something like this, and partially because it just mechanically was the right thing to do, my credit was shot, but I had come across a really good investment opportunity. So I called a childhood buddy of mine as a real estate investor. I said, hey, I got this a good deal come across. I was working with some banks selling bank-owned properties, and this was just a smoking deal. And I said, we can get in on this. I'm like, I can cover the down. I've got a couple deals closing. I can cover the down payment. If we can finance it under your name, just split the difference when we sell or whatever. He's like, looked at the numbers. He's like, yeah, that's a great deal. Let's do it. So the house was in his name. And we hadn't put me on the title because it's kind of a gentleman's agreement. We could have put the financing in his name and then put the title in both of ours, but we didn't. And so when she went to try and take the house, she ran into a little bit of a roadblock in that she was divorcing me and not my friend. She left empty-handed. I was like, you know what? Just get your stuff, get out, take whatever you want. When I went back to the house, it was empty.
What you wanted?
everything. And I do mean everything. I don't remember if you remember that movie, True Lies.
I remember the movie. I don't remember the scene.
It was Tom Arnold and I think, was it Arnold Schwarzenegger?
Yep.
No,
Yeah.
yeah. And she's like, she took the ice cube trays out of the freezer. What kind of sick bitch takes the ice cube trays out of the freezer? But that was it. There were 2 towels left in the closet. Otherwise, that house has clean. Everything gone. And I was like, it's fine. I got a bed and I was like, that was it. So she was pissed. But, like at that point, I just couldn't care less. I was there by myself. It was peaceful. I didn't have that. You know how it is when you're fighting all the time and getting the silent treatment, all that, just that heaviness in the house all the time. And that was gone. And yes, I was miserable. And yes, I was broke. And yes, I was losing my business. And yes, I was struggling with this whole concept of getting a divorce. But at the same time, I felt like I could breathe. And I'll go ahead. I was just going to say, I think I think that's when the process of me trying that identity thing, like who the hell am I really? I think that's when it really hit me because the house was empty and you're there.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. I find when you have a lot going on and then it switches from like you're very busy, even if it's with the silent treatment and arguing, there's still something going on and it's occupying your mind. But you take that away and you're left with silence, and that silence can be bloody loud.
It is. It is. It's heavy in and of itself. It gives you that opportunity to, if you take it, to really think and start figuring yourself out again as a individual, not as a husband or, that. And in my case, I had no kids. So that was also made things a lot easier. I've seen a lot of my buddies divorce with kids, and that just ties them to that misery for 20 years.
Yeah, it does. So what do you start asking yourself when you're in that phase of who am I? How do you start to develop that personality, or that not personality, but how do you start to develop that sense of who you are again? Because I imagine you went through it a double whammy of losing your income and losing your relationship. So most people only deal with losing one of those at a time, and that's enough.
Yeah.
So losing both of those is a hell of a shift.
Yeah. Like on the career side of it, I did struggle because I didn't have a lot of passion for what I was doing, the real estate. It was fantastic money and I was really good at it, but I didn't particularly enjoy it, So I was trying to do that half-assed. I was managing to close a deal or two here and keep myself afloat. And I also went back because years prior, I had worked in the nightclubs. This is all in Las Vegas. So I was like, okay, I need some money coming in, steady money, even if it's just a little bit. And then the extra, I get a real estate closing here and here. It's a bigger commission. But so I went, I called some old friends of mine that were still in the nightclub industry and went back to doing security and, some personal bodyguarding and different things. Anything that I could do to pick up a couple bucks just to make sure the food stayed on the table and the power stayed on. So that was kind of that was an ego check, I think, because, for the last, 10 years prior to that, I had that real estate money and I was doing real good. So I was the guy getting the table at the clubs, paying for my friends, this and that. And now I'm the guy bouncing people into the bathroom and kicking out drunks and waiting on the people at the table. So that was, I was demoralizing, but, maybe I needed a little bit of an ego check as well. On the personal side of things, I was about late 30s, about 40, 39, 40 when this happened. And you get all of these ideas. Well, at least I did. I'm like, fuck, I'm old now. I'm like, who am I going to date? Like, is anybody going to want to date me? I'm divorced. You have all these questions, right? And you doubt yourself and your value, I guess, in the dating marketplace, which I'm here to tell anybody who's going through this, just put that aside. It's not the truth. My moment of clarity as far as that was concerned, I remember it so clearly because I was feeling really self-conscious about my age and the divorce and, all these things. And I was talking to this impossibly sexy little Cuban girl, just, with the kind of body you can only get from like a youth spent figure skating, just tight, curly black hair. And I'm like, she's so hot. I'm like, I'm this old divorced guy. And she was like, so how old are you? And I was like, I'm not even going to try and lie. I'm like, whatever. I'm just going to get it over with. And then I told her whatever it was. I'm 40, I think. And she looked at me and she got this kind of look on her face. And she's like, I think you're older than my dad. And I was like, is that a problem? And she looked at me. She's like, no, Poppy. I was like, maybe this won't be so bad. Yeah, the light switch went off there. I'm like, okay, maybe the little bit of gray hair and everything else, maybe it's not so bad. And it turned out it's not. You'll find that out once you get through that emotional fog. For anybody who's listening to this and going through that, you come out the other side. Older guys have a certain value in the marketplace that is undeniable.
I think it's I've equated it to doing that inner work and knowing who you are, and that certainty in who I am as a man. I find a lot of women find that attractive.
Yeah. Yeah. The experience, all those things that come with being a more mature guy, because guys mature much later than women.
We do.
Yeah. So in many ways, I still feel like I'm a kid, but that's all right.
That's okay. You got to bring that playfulness.
Yeah.
So you were bouncing, what led you to start traveling? I know it's one of your big passions now.
Yeah. And it was before, but it wasn't something I found myself able to do too much because I was so busy with the real estate business. But I spent some time going from different club to different club and trying to get real estate to work, but I really was not in it. So I was trying to do some other things. I was trying to do some other businesses and just random things, like gave my shot at, like, I was in that beach body company for a little bit. And just anything that I could do. I was like, I don't want to do real estate. I want something that's going to give me a little bit of freedom. And I want to get back out of the nightclub because, being a 40-year-old bouncer with a bunch of 22-year-olds, it was all right, but whatever. So I was doing some affiliate marketing online. I kind of taught myself, bought a few courses, this, that, and I was selling, some products where you get paid for selling somebody else's products. And I wasn't making great money, but it was enough to really supplement, so I didn't have any like stress. What was I making? Like, I don't know, I think about $2,000 a month, 1,800, 2,100, depending on the months. Definitely not killing it, not by any stretch of the imagination. But I was at work one night and I'm in the back corner on my phone and I was like, I'm Googling cost of living in like Mexico and Thailand and everything. And I was like, man, according to this, $2,000 a month, I can live in Mexico or wherever at the time. I don't think, that'd be a stretch now. Things have changed a lot since the pandemic, but that's kind of when and it was a couple nights later, I had a really, really bad night at work. Really bad. Like, just everything possible that could go wrong. It was a Nelly concert at the club and it was just absolute shit. And I walked out. I just couldn't take it anymore. And my buddy was the head of security. He was the chief. I walked out the door. I'm like, I'm out. He was like, all right, fair enough. You coming back? I'm like, nah, I don't think so. He's like, all right, I'll give you a call tomorrow. That was it. I started making plans then. I sold the house that I was in, that my buddy and I had bought together. So it took me about 3 months to wrap things up. And I bought, I had been driving an old Chevy pickup because I was, trying to do some construction stuff on the side and help my buddies when they're flipping houses. I was doing anything I could to get some money in. And so I sold that and I bought a primer black 1993 Toyota Corolla. I thought, I'm going to drive down to Mexico. I'm going to drive down to Playa del Carmen. I'm like, and nobody is going to look at this car and be like, hey, let's kidnap this gringo because we can get some money out of him, So, I once I got the car situated, got the house closed, and, got rid of most of my stuff, I put 2 suitcases, a box, and my dog in the car, and we headed down to Mexico.
I have a bit of a similar fantasy. I haven't bought the car yet, but just having the biggest piece of shit, like you could see every now and then. This is how I imagine it. It only starts with a screwdriver and a specific screwdriver. It's like from 1987. It's got, it used to have paint, but now it's just rust. You can see the ground as you drive on it. That's the kind of truck I want to buy one of these days.
That was basically it, only a car. But bulletproof though, those Corollas, man.
Yeah, I imagine. How did you end up why did you decide on Playa?
No reason. The pictures looked really nice. And I had been to that area maybe 7 or 8 years prior to that. And I love the Caribbean water. Been to Cancun and Puerto Aventuras and stuff. And, that it was just so beautiful. It's like literally it's the first time I'd seen the Caribbean and any waters like that with white sand beaches and water you can see all the way down. So I was like, you know what? That was one of the most beautiful places I'd ever seen, was that area of the world at the time. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to drive there. I didn't know anybody. I hadn't really been there before. I'd been kind of to the area, but I was like, I'm just going to go down there and figure it out. This is going to be the change that, I'm just going to find, which leads to the question you mentioned in the intro, right? I was in Playa. I think it was my second night in Playa del Carmen. And I just was walking around. You've been to Playa, right?
I lived in Playa for about a year.
That's right.
That's where we came from just before this.
Okay, that's right. I thought I remembered that. So I was just walking on 5th Avenue and 10th Avenue and trying to get just checking it out. I'm like, okay, my new place. And I just stopped. It was hot. It was the first week of August. And yeah, you know how it is. It's muggy. It's hot. So I'm like, you know what? I need an ice cold beer. So I stopped into this just random bar, and ordered the beer. And some guy, I don't know if he was American, Canadian, sitting next to me. I'm having my beer, and he's like, hey, how you doing? I'm like, good, man. And the first question out of his mouth, he's like, are you searching for something? Or are you running from something? Like, that's kind of a random question. I'm like, I'm not in trouble with the law. I guess maybe searching for something. He's like, yeah, most people who move here do that. I'm like, well, how'd you know I wasn't a tourist? How'd you know I was moving here? And he's like, you can tell. Like, yeah, interesting. Chatted with him for a little while and never saw him again.
So what did that question mean to you? I find it such a good question. And I really believe that questions like that show up in the moments we need them most. So what did that question mean to you, and what did it show you?
Well, it was timely. Like you said, it showed up in the right moment. And what it meant to me is that, you know what, because I had to think about it for a second, and I was searching for something. I was just searching for honestly, I believe I was searching for me. Who am I? It kind of goes back to that question of like, really, who am I without this? Because I still was the divorced guy who was broke and lost a business and lost everything. I'm like, is that my identity? Or is it, can you strip away further and really get down to who you are as a person? I don't know. I think about that question a lot. I mean, that was a long time ago. When was that? 13. So 12 years ago or so. And I still think about that question. It was impactful at the time. And, I thought about it a lot after that. And, it was that moving abroad was something I always wanted to do, just was never able. And I think that was a really good first step in finding out who I really am and reinventing myself into somebody that is more aligned with my core values, if that makes sense.
No, totally makes sense. That's the work I do. That's the work I've done on myself. What were you doing to find those core values and then get more aligned with that?
That took probably longer than I would care to admit. I mean, obviously, there are some core values that I knew regardless, but doing real estate and just chasing money and the status and the newest restaurant opening in Vegas and the car, that kind of stuff. It was fun to a certain degree, obviously, but that wasn't really in line with who I am. Yes, I like nice things. I love earning money. I love pushing myself and building business. I love all of that, but not for the sheer purpose of buying material things. So, man, it's a complex question, but I took some time and just really got to know myself with reflection, meditation. I had always been into
Maybe this is a better way to ask it. I'm big on rituals, and I find rituals lead you to bigger changes. So you just do small things every day, and that leads to answering those bigger questions. So what new rituals did you take on to do that work while you were traveling?
That's another good question. I've always been into fitness and working out as part of core values to me. So I kind of doubled down on that, and that's kind of the bedrock for me was that. And then I started reading more I'd always been a big avid reader and a big proponent of personal development, but it took on a new light when I was in the position I was, as opposed to, hey, I'm really successful and I'm just trying to get to the next level financially. Now I was looking at more stuff that was more introspective. So I don't know if I had any specific new rituals that I developed. I did spend a lot of time, at the beach and more in nature, like the cenotes around there are beautiful. The jungle is beautiful. There's a lot of different things. So I reconnected a little bit more, I think, with nature, which I was not doing at all in Vegas. And I think a lot of it was just focused on a lot of deep introspection and self-reflection, which looking back, I really wasn't doing prior to that. I was focused more outward and I became a lot more focused inward.
I have two thoughts on that. I suggest, and it was passed on to me, is when you go through something difficult, there's three rituals that I suggest everybody follows, and that's time in nature, some sort of movement, and some sort of presence practice. So I'll unpack that really quick. Time in nature, just go get that vitamin D from the sun and have some fresh air, and you'll get that grounding effect just by I guess touching grass.
Oh, just touching the earth, sand, anything, I find,
And being in Playa, it must have been wonderful to go into the ocean at any time.
Yeah.
So time in nature, some sort of movement. So go for a walk. I know this sounds so simple, but when you're going through something complex, I find it's best to go back to simplicity. So just go for a walk, lift something heavy. I do boxing. I know everybody has their own thing. And then some sort of presence practice. You talked about meditation. I do meditation, but that meditation's not for everybody. So just something that gets you into the present moment. And sometimes boxing is that thing for me. It's impossible to be worried about what's happening tomorrow or what you did yesterday if somebody's trying to punch you in the face.
Yeah, impossible.
Well, I mean, it is possible, but you're going to get punched in the face.
Right. You learn.
You learn really quick. So if you put those three rituals together, I find that things start whispering to you and things, what doesn't belong anymore kind of falls away. And I know we're talking a little woo-woo here, but this is what I find works when you're in difficult times.
I would agree. Based on my experience, I didn't have any particular guidance. That's just what I figured out. Because like you, I do Muay Thai, boxing, jiu-jitsu. So I threw myself into that. I was actually teaching Muay Thai in Playa for a little bit. And you know what else?
Where were you teaching that? I'm curious.
There was a gym there called AGM for a short period of time. It was gone by the time you were there. Great gym. It ended up burning. So
I'm just seeing if we were in the same areas.
I don't know. That and the other thing that this helped me from when everything was happening all the way through is I had a dog and he was amazing. And it's amazing to me how animals can be attuned to your feelings, your moods, your everything. And people throw the term emotional support animal around a lot or whatever. I'm not saying that's exactly what he was, but that's what he was, and walking with him, I found really helped because no creature is better at being in the moment, in the present than a dog. They don't care. As long as they're with you and they're on a walk, that's it. They're happy. That's it.
Yeah. We've got 2 dogs and it's kind of fun traveling with them. Like we've been, through Canada, the States, and now Mexico with them. And it's funny to see their reactions to different things. And in Playa, I don't know if you remember the iguanas would sit on the walls, on the top of the walls. So sometimes they would come down and the dogs chase them. And that's, they had the best time. Not to do anything, like they were incapable of hurting anything, but
yeah,
they just thought it was fun to chase them.
I wish I had a pit bull, and I was when I first moved to Playa, I was in this house and it was on the outside. It wasn't in the center. So I was in like Mexico, and it was a kind of a big yard and a house. It had a bedroom, living room, dining area, kitchen, kind of little thing, but a big walled yard. But outside that yard was just jungle. So the kind of insects that I would get in there were shocking. But I remember one night specifically, I'll get off on a tangent here, but it's funny because I was laying in, I was reading, I was doing my thing, and I get up and my dog was laying kind of in the bedroom door. So I walk out the bedroom door. I had left to the right, I had left the front door of the house open. trying to get a breeze. And I turned left to go to the kitchen to get some water out of the refrigerator. And I noticed out of the corner of my eye, I thought it was a rat or a small cat or something. And I turned on the light. It was a tarantula. It was a tarantula like this big around. And I looked at the way it was walking. And I'm like, he came in the front door. He had to walk right by my dog to go over there. I'm like, dude, like, you don't got to kill it, but can you give a heads up that somebody else is in the house? Like, just a bark. I don't know. Hey, Dad, whatever. But yeah. So I had to get that out of there. And they can move really fast when they're motivated.
I didn't need to know that.
They can move remarkably fast. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. The dog really helped me. I'm not saying anybody going through something should automatically go get a dog, but for me, it was a great deal of help. I talked to him more than I talked to just about anybody else for a period of time,
I think, well, we got our first dog as I was going through the worst of the divorce, just meaning like the legal shit. And just the act of waking up and having to walk her in the morning was so helpful, because otherwise I would just stay in bed. And then you're living for something bigger than just you.
Yeah. They're remarkable creatures. I do love dogs. I don't have one now. He passed away a couple of years ago, and I'm traveling too much to really consider getting a dog. But at the time, great support.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. I don't know what else to say to that, but yeah, I'm very grateful for the dogs we have too. Just having that consistency and that kindness that they offer, that goodness in them.
Yep. And it's unconditional love, absolutely unconditional love, which, we I think in divorce situations, we think maybe we had that, and then we find out that we absolutely do not. So you're like, okay, well, this creature is never going to turn its back on me. So I think maybe there's some sort of solace in that as well. I don't know what it is, but there's something there.
Maybe that's the fourth ritual. So time in nature, movement, some sort of presence practice, and get a dog.
Maybe. Well, it's like that old saying, if you want to find out who really loves you, throw your dog and your wife in the trunk of your car for an hour and see who's happy to see you when you open the trunk. Then you'll know.
Then you will know. Yeah. So after Playa, where did you go after that? Were you starting to, sorry, let me frame that question a little better. As you were in Playa, did you start to recognize who you were, or did you do that through, I imagine you went through adventures after that?
Yeah, that's kind of part of what I found out is, that travel is something that's very important to me. It's part of my core values. And that was something that I had been putting to the side time and time again because I was so busy with my real estate business. I had the money, but I didn't have the time. And I felt renewed. I felt alive. I think so many people just kind of sleepwalk through the routine of their day, and then one day blends into the next. And when I was traveling, I felt alive every single day. I mean, colors were more vivid. It was amazing. And so I identified that as one of my core values. I'm never going to sacrifice that for money again. Never going to do it. So I was based out of Playa for quite a while. I had a roommate there, Canadian guy, great guy, man. And we decided, you know what? We both kind of have remote work. The affiliate sales had kind of petered out, but I had picked up a remote job and wasn't making a ton of money, but was getting by and just living life, and we decided to pack up my car, all our stuff and the dog, and drive down to Colombia. That was the goal. But a series of events happened. I ended up in Belize, which is directly south of Mexico, and went through the border, and it reinforced to me how difficult it is traveling with a big dog, because you have to have all this different stuff. And then I had the car on top of that. And the border was a real hassle. We had to go to this station, get shaken down by this guy, just the standard stuff. So we get through all that and we're driving like, okay, we're set. We're on the way. There's a town called Orange Walk, little town, and we grabbed a bite to eat, kept driving. About 15 miles out of Orange Walk, in the jungle, there's just a road going through a jungle all around it. There was a roadblock, and I think they were looking for drug traffickers or whatever, because these were not your average cops. They were the special forces looking guys, the black camo and the machine guns and all the crazy stuff. And we got stopped, and I'm like, whatever, we're not carrying drugs. So I hand over all my stuff. They're going through all my paperwork, and they're like, okay, you don't have insurance. What do you mean? So we got to get insurance at the border. I'm like, Bro, I went through every single station because I know I had to pay somebody at just about every single station, you know. And like, well, we don't see any proof of it. He's like, so we take that very seriously here in Belize. Maybe you didn't know that, but yeah, we're going to arrest you and impound your car. And I was like, shit, this isn't good. So back and forth negotiations. And he's like, look, you're going to jail. He's like, but if your friend wants to drive your car back to Orange Walk, get insurance, come back here and show us proof of insurance, we won't impound your car. So I was like, okay, well, that's a step in the right direction, right? So my buddy took my car and my dog and all our stuff and headed to Orange Walk. It was only about 10 or 15 minutes away. Meanwhile, I'm in handcuffs in the back of this military vehicle, and I'm waiting and I'm waiting. And I'm like, okay, insurance places are a dime a dozen there. I think you've spent some time in Belize. You can find them very easy. It's not like getting insurance in the US or Canada. Okay, so I'm like, okay, 10, 15 minutes there, 10, 15 minutes get insurance, 10, 15 minutes back. I'm like, 30, 45 minutes, he should be back. So I'm sweating in the back of this military vehicle with my handcuffs and some other drunk dude that they had picked up. And I'm waiting, and an hour goes by, hour and a half goes by. And they're like, where's your friend? Kind of messing with me. Like, where's your friend? He coming back? I'm like, I don't know. Hopefully. Like 2 hours almost. And they're packing up the roadblock. They're like, okay, well, it looks like you're going to jail. And so I was like, man, what the hell happened? I would like get an accident. Like maybe he got pulled over without insurance or whatever. Like, so I'm trying to figure out what happened. Then they're packing up the roadblock. They're like, I guess because it was Friday. So they're like, okay, well, here's how it's going to work. We're going to bring you to jail. And then and I'm sure they were fucking with me, but they're like, okay, so the judge will get your case on Monday. Depending on how many cases, he might get to it Monday or Tuesday. So I'm looking at, 3-4 days in a Belizean jail. I'm like, well, this doesn't sound good. So I'm like, hey, I'm like, can I talk to you outside the truck? And yeah, sure. And I still got my handcuffs on. And I'm like, is there anything that we can work out? I mean, can I just pay some sort of fine here and expedite the process? And they were like, oh, I see what we can work out. He's like, how much money you got? I'm like, I don't know. So he takes my wallet out of my pocket, and I had $400. So he's like, take his handcuffs off. He took my handcuffs, give my wallet back, took everything. And like a dumbass, I had it all in my wallet, not hidden, not some in the wallet and some hidden.
I learned that one.
Yeah. And I knew that. I knew that. But for some reason, I didn't have it that way. So like, all right, well, do you want a ride back to Orange Walk, or do you want to stay here? And I'm like, well, I don't feel like staying in the middle of the jungle overnight. I'm like, if you can give me a ride back to Orange Walk, I'd appreciate it. And then maybe I can get on some Wi-Fi because my cell phone wasn't working. I had to get on Wi-Fi, and I'm like, I'll try and contact my friend and find out where he's at. And they're like, yeah, we can do that. I'm like, so we can packing everything up. They start the truck, and I see my car coming over the hill. So my buddy's there. He pulls up, and I'm like, dude, where were you? And he's like, man, I don't know. And then they came up, and they're like, let's see the proof of insurance. He's like, I don't have it. He's like, it's late on Friday. Everybody was gone. I went to every single place in town. Everybody was closed. They took off early for Friday. And they're like, well, I guess we're going to have to tow the car. And I was kind of an asshole, but I had nothing left to lose. I'm like, the fuck you are. I'm like, you just took every dime I have. You aren't taking my car. And he's just like, all right, whatever. So like, hey, they're taking off. I'm like, hey, can we get something from you, like a card or something, in case we run into your buddies 10 minutes down the road and they pull the same shit with us? And he's like, nope, you're on your own. And they took off. And that was, we made it to, we were driving, sweating every minute of the way, waiting for another roadblock. And we were trying to get to the town San Ignacio. And we'll get a hotel there. We'll get some insurance, whatever we got to do, and we'll figure out our next move. We come over this hill and down around this curve, and it's at night. And sure as shit, right outside of San Ignacio, there's another roadblock. But it wasn't those special forces looking guys. It was just a local yokel cops. And so when he pulls over, he's like, hey, you got your paperwork. He was cool, and I took every single thing that I had, Mexican, Belizean, American, everything. And I handed him a stack of shit like this high. And I'm like, yep, here you go. And he was like, he's trying to put a flashlight in his mouth and go through it. And he's like, you got insurance? I'm like, yeah, we just went through a roadblock like back in Orange Walk. He's like, oh, okay, here. Welcome to Belize. Go ahead. Oh, yeah. So that was the best night of sleep I've ever had in my life.
I imagine.
I was not prepared for that. And then the next day I get a call, and the job that I was working, that remote gig, they're like, oh yeah, we're taking a different direction. We don't need you anymore. So, I'm like, it was an ill-fated trip. My buddy took a bus. He went further on. I took the car and the dog, and we went back to Playa just because I knew people there and all that. So, man, that was
I
a
hope
rough
you didn't
trip.
get stopped again for insurance.
No, I got insurance.
Mm.
I got insurance. But I didn't get stopped again. No, I made it all the way back to Playa without a problem, of course. But yeah,
Funny how that always happens, eh? When you don't have it.
Yeah, the weird thing is, I literally did go through every required station at the border. So I don't know if that guy in the jungle kind of dipped the paper out or if I just didn't get handed the right stuff. I honestly don't know what happened because I did everything by the book. But yeah.
I'm finding in Central America, sometimes you do all the right things, but it's not the right thing, if you know what I mean.
Oh, yeah, I know. But yeah, that was my adventure. But even during all that, which is incredibly stressful, a part of me loves that because it's not just that regular day-to-day life. So I just love the traveling. I love the challenges that come with it. I love everything with it. So again, going back to it, figuring out who you really are, what stirs your passions, what you can lock your identity on that isn't connected to your outer stuff, your net worth, your career, your marriage, whatever it might be.
Well, it's what you're saying. It makes you feel alive, right? And commuting an hour each way to go sit in a cubicle where there's a flickering light over top of you and you're poking at a keyboard for 8 hours a day, that's not feeling alive.
Not for me.
Well, I don't think it is for a lot of people. And I think so many people go through that and that's their life.
Yeah. Fluorescent lights, hour and a half commute in rush hour traffic both ways. I can't do it. So yeah, from that point forward, that when I was in Playa and I got aligned with certain things about who I was, I'm like, okay, I will never sacrifice this part of me, even if it means, at the time, like even if it means that I really don't have that much money, because that was more important to me. Now, I'm not saying money isn't good because, started businesses, I'm back, but it's much better to be traveling with money than it is to be traveling broke. But, there's priorities and you have to be true to yourself.
I think that life is made up of 8 areas, and I never remember all 8 of them, but it's things like physical, spiritual, mental, family, friends, all of that. Financial is just one part of that. It's not the entire pie. And I think it should be true. I agree with you. Money is important, but it's not everything. Absolutely pursue it. Pursue it as far as you want to take it. But it's not everything. I would rather have that story of almost getting arrested in Belize than making an extra $100,000 last year.
Yeah. I don't know if you've seen it. I saw a study, and it was a couple years ago, so numbers may have changed a little bit, and it was specifically for the U.S., but the cutoff was around $76,000 in earnings on average in the U.S. Now, obviously, that can vary if you're living in small town Minnesota versus New York City or whatever, but that was the cutoff. If less than that, you had the stresses that came with not being able to pay bills or provide your kids with certain things and all that kind of thing. But above that, there was no change in the happiness index. It didn't matter if you were making 76,000 or 760,000. The happiness level didn't change. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've seen that same study. Yeah, I don't know if I completely buy it, but I understand where they're coming from, the point they're trying to make.
Yeah, I don't know if I 100% buy it either because my overall quality of life has been much better when I've had a lot of money. So
yeah, but you have to balance that with, is there a trade-off in pursuing that money?
Right. And that's where I got lost in the real estate because I traded everything off to pursue the money. And, since then I have learned to balance that much better. And I found myself to be much happier than I was then.